Hello and welcome to a very special presentation on my YouTube channel. I'm just putting together a little video here to help you on the SAT test when you take your new best friend in there. That's going to be a TI-89 calculator. So if you're watching this video, you're probably one of my students or maybe Mr. Zimmerman's that is going to be taking the SAT shortly. And you probably borrowed a calculator from us and you're watching this video to learn some of the stuff that this calculator can do. The TI-89 calculator has a built-in CAS or computer algebra system. The TI Inspire, the TI-83, the TI-84 do not have a CAS. The TI-89 is not allowed on the Pennsylvania State Standardized Assessment, the PSSA test. It is also not allowed on the Keystone exams. But for some reason, it is allowed on the SAT. If you know how to use it, this TI-89 calculator can give you quite an advantage over students that do not have one. So first, let's do some of the basics here. We've got these two keys up in the upper left corner. We have a blue key, that is the second function key for the blue items above each key. We also have the green diamond key for the green items above each key. So you'll hear me say second function this or green diamond that to know what button to push. Here circled are the x, y, z variables. Usually we use x, but there's other variables available. Parenthesis, make sure we know where those are. We have our left and right parenthesis. And right next to that here's the comma key. Once in a while we'll need to put a comma in there. We've got the up caret to put exponents in. And be sure you know the difference between the minus sign here right above the plus sign. That is very different from the negative sign down here at the bottom. Notice the negative sign has the little parenthesis around it. So one's an operation, subtraction. The other is a negation. You know, I put up here clear the memory. You don't have to clear the memory before the SAT test, but since you're watching this video, we're going to be using one of the F2 menus. Sometimes the menus can get scrambled if a student's been in there screwing around with the different settings. So everything will be fine if we clear the memory. And here's how we're going to do that. Let me blow this up. There we go. You can see here, right above the number 6 key, it says mem for memory, and it's in blue. I'm looking on mine right now. Well, no, it's in yellow, so that should be for the second function key. Oh, no, I just noticed that. My calculators have sort of a yellow second function key. Here it's a blue one. So memory, you're going to want to hit second function and 6, and I'm doing that on my calculator right now. So second function, you hit 6, and you'll see the memory screen come up. Notice in the upper left-hand corner it says reset. So just hit the F1 key, and you get a drop-down menu that has 3 options. You can clear just the RAM, just the flash RAM, or all memory. Let's choose 3 and hit enter, all memory. Hit enter for yes. So now the calculator should go blank. Sometimes your screen might be kind of dark. There is a very easy way to lighten and darken your screen on the TI-89. You're going to hold down the green diamond key and use plus or minus. When you hold down the green diamond key and hit plus, it gets darker and darker. Hold down green diamond minus, it will get lighter and lighter. So adjust your calculator to where you feel comfortable. Okay, these are some examples we did in class way back in Chapter P. We'll just revisit some of those, and we'll use the TI-89 to sort of get them under control. So here's example 3. We were multiplying negative 3a times b to the 4th times the quantity 4ab to the negative 3rd. Well, if you type that in your TI-89, we can replace all the a's with x's and all the b's with y's. And notice down here, here's how you're going to type it in your calculator. Notice I put parenthesis around each term. Here's the first term. I will put in blue parenthesis, and then I hit the multiply key, and then here is the second term in red parenthesis. It's probably not a big deal in this problem, but let's be extra careful with our parenthesis. It will pay off in the long run. So type that in your calculator and see what you get. You can pause the video. My calculator spit out negative 12 xy. So your calculator will combine terms, it will get your exponents together, and it will get rid of negative exponents if any exist. Letter B down here, we've got a quantity 2xy squared, and that quantity is in parenthesis, and it's raised to the third power. So as we type this in a calculator, we want to have parenthesis around that quantity. So here I have my 2 times x times y to the second. And then I close off that set of parentheses, and I use my up caret and give that a quantity cubed. So give that a try. If everything goes right and you hit enter, your calculator should spit out an 8x y to the sixth. So if you're having trouble memorizing those different rules and properties of exponents, the TI-89 might just save your bacon. All right, here's example 4 from that same section. We had this that we wanted to rewrite with only positive exponents. Again, they used a's and b's. We're going to use x's and y's. And notice down here in blue is how it's going to look when you type it into your display. We definitely want to parenthesize the numerator off. I'll do that in black ink. And then we're going to put a set of parentheses specifically around the denominator. So type this into your calculator exactly as you see it. And a real nice thing about these TI-89s is when you type this into the display line and hit enter, you should see it appear just like this in the display unit. And then off to the right side, you will see your answer. That should be 3x to the fifth over y to the fifth. And there we go. Okay, next up is the square rooting feature. Notice here above the multiply key, there's a little radical. So we're going to need to use a second function to get there. So second function, and you'll hit the multiply key. And on the display, you'll see this. You'll see a square root sign appear and a left parenthesis. So you're going to see a root and a left parenthesis. You want to put in whatever you're going to square root. Make sure you close the parenthesis when you're done underneath the radical. So here's example 10, way back from P2, day 2. We were simplifying 75x cubed. So on your TI-89, you're going to do second function and get your radical symbol, and it'll be a left parenthesis. Type in 75x up caret 2, and close your parenthesis. Type it in just like that and hit enter, and you're going to see this as your answer. 5 times the square root of 3 times the absolute value of x. So, it even simplified the square root of 75. Square root of 75, that's 5 times 3, and that becomes 5 roots of 3. And when we square root the x squared, it brought it out. Notice the calculator even put the absolute value bars there to make sure that that answer was correct. And that x was a positive number. Now, of course, these TI-89s are not flawless. They are not perfect. Here's a little thing I made up all on my own here. The square root of x squared y cubed z to the fourth. Now, when I typed this into my calculator, remember we do have x, y, and z keys. My answer come out like this, the absolute value of x, which makes sense because that's squared. We can bring it out and bar it to make sure it stays positive. We do have a z squared, and notice because we brought it out as a fourth power and it's squared, we don't need the absolute value bars around z squared. But for some reason, the calculator leaves a radical with a y cubed under it. Because it's not an even one, we could make that y cubed into a y squared times y, and we could have the absolute value of x times y times z squared, and that would leave 1y trapped under the radical. So again, these calculators are not perfect. Again, this would be the fully simplified answer. It seemed like the calculator had trouble maybe because that was an odd exponent. It did fine on the x squared and the z to the fourth. The bars around the x, we didn't need them around the z because it is squared, but it seemed to have trouble with that y cubed. Okay, up next. Ooh, this might bring back some fond memories. Combining radicals with 2 apples minus 3 oranges. We can't do much with that, but we can let the calculator do the work. So do 2 and then square root, and you'll put your 48 in there and close it, minus 3 square root, and then put your 27 in there and close it. So the calculator will simplify each radical, and then if possible, it will add or subtract. This turns out to be a negative 1 square root of 3. All right, again, let the calculator do all the heavy lifting. All right, on to P2 Day 3. We did some rationalizing of denominators. Can a TI-89 rationalize a denominator? Oh, you betcha. Now for this, here's the exact example in the book. We definitely want to parenthesize that denominator. We need to make sure that denominator is its own group. So here's how you type it into your display. 2 divided by, and then I've got here in black a parenthesis, and then we've got 3 plus root, and then they give us a parenthesis after the root. We put the 7 in, I close off the radical parenthesis, and then I got to close on the denominator parenthesis. If you type that into your calculator and hit enter, you should get negative, this is how the calculator gives it to me, negative quantity root 7 minus 3. Now, on the SAT test, it might be multiple choice, and maybe this does not perfectly match a multiple choice answer. Well, what happens if we distribute this negative? That's going to turn to a positive 3, and that'll be a minus root 7. So keep in mind, you know, the SAT might have it in either of these forms. These are exactly the same. All we have to do is distribute the negative to get there. Okay, and now we get to the real juicy stuff. This is why the TI-89 can be a huge advantage on the SAT test. When you're on your home screen, if you press the F2 menu or F2 key, you get the algebra drop-down menu. Now, this is what you're going to see in that drop-down menu. There's actually a little bit more than this. It goes down to at least 8, I think. Or no, it goes down to 9 and then A and B. The big ones are these first 3. Solve, factor, and expand. Solve and factor are very closely related, so I think in this video we're going to look at the expand first. And expand is the same thing as sort of foiling it out. Like you could do x plus 5 to the 7th power. And you know, to FOIL that out by hand would be tedious. Or using binomial expansion theorem would be confusing. We can always let the TI-89 do it. Yeah, here we go. Example 4, way back, I forget what section this was. We had this quantity. I'll put in a set of red parentheses, or blue parentheses. We're going to multiply that by this one. I put in red parentheses. So this is a great one to do on the TI-89. Again, we got to be careful with our parentheses. So here we would use the F2 drop-down menu. We would choose the expand command, and they will always give us our starting parenthesis. Here I have it in blue. Notice way at the end I close off the expansion parenthesis with another blue parenthesis. And then here is our first trinomial. We have our x squared minus 2x plus 2. That has its own set of parentheses. I used red here. And then we're going to multiply that by the second trinomial, x squared plus 2x plus 2. Make sure this has its own set of parentheses also. Now, if you don't want me to spoil the surprise, pause the video until you get your own answer from your calculator. And if you typed in everything correct, this should boil down to x to the 4th plus 4. If you FOILed it out by hand, there'd be a lot of terms that are going to cancel for x cubed, x squared, and x. So we're just down to x to the 4th plus 4. Okay, example 7, the cube of a binomial. So we have the quantity 3x plus 2, and we want to cube that quantity. So F2 menu, get your expand command, left parenthesis is given. There's our 3x plus 2 quantity. We up caret it, give it a 3 for the exponent, and we close off the expand command. And if you hit enter, you should get 27x cubed plus 54x squared plus 36x plus 8. Okay, let's try a juicier one. So here I got 5 minus 8x quantity to the 4th. And the reason I'm doing this one specifically is when you enter that, the answer is too big for the display column. Look over here at this calculator. I shouldn't use black ink on it. This red will stand out a little better. Maybe your answer will not fit on that much of a line. So what we can do is we can go up into the display using this up arrow. And then once our answer is highlighted, we can scroll to the right to see every term in our answer. Because my answer, I can look at my display and see the 4,096x to the fourth minus 10,240x cubed plus 9,600. And then I see a little sort of colored in triangle facing to the right. That's telling me there's more answer. So I scroll up and highlight that, and I scroll over, and I see that 9,600 is x squared minus 4,000x, and it keeps going, plus the constant 625. So be aware that your answer might not fit in the display screen. We can always get up there and scroll around with those arrow keys. Now, let's look at the solve and the factor at the same time. These are very closely related. Again, this is still on the F2 drop-down menu. And let me get a little room over here and show the difference between the two. Like solve, they might ask you to solve x squared minus 4 is equal to 0. Factor, they might say, okay, here's x squared minus 4. We want you to factor it. So the difference between these two is the solve, you're going to have it equal to some number. And it doesn't have to be 0. It could be anything. So for solve, we need to solve it so it's equal to something. If we're factoring it, we can just factor x squared minus 4, no problem. So doing these in the calculator is going to be very closely related. Let's see what we got here. This one, they're just asking us to factor. So let's type that in exactly as we see it. We're going to do F2 menu, option factor, give you the left parenthesis. There's your 16x to the fourth minus 81. And if you've typed everything in just perfectly, you'll see this break down into three factors: a 2x minus 3, a 2x plus 3, and a 4x squared plus 9. 4x squared plus 9. So there's the answer if we factor it. Now, just to show comparison here, let's go back up to this original problem and now set it equal to 0. So now we can make this into a solve problem. Now be careful here. Watch how we have to change what we type in. Of course, we're not going to use the factor command. We're going to go to F2 and use solve. And now we're going to type that in exactly as we see it here. 16x to the fourth minus 81. Now we're going to set it equal to 0. And we're going to need to put a comma. That comma key is right next to the parenthesis key. And as smart as the calculator is, it does not solve for a variable unless we tell it to solve for a variable. And since our function has an x in it, let's tell it to solve for x. And then we're going to close our parenthesis. So we set it equal to 0 and give it a comma x, and then we should be good. And when you hit enter on that one, my calculator display says x equals 3 halves or x equals negative 3 halves. Now I'm going to race up here on the sort of the top of this slide. Look at this stuff in red. You know, the difference between factoring and solving is here in the red stuff, we factored this. Now if I set this factor equal to 0, I would add 3 and divide by 2. So that x is 3 halves, just like the calculator told us here. And if I set this middle term, 2x plus 3 equal to 0, I would subtract 3 and divide by 2 to get x alone. So that is this other answer. Notice this factor, if we try to solve it, if we set this equal to 0, 4x squared plus 9 equal to 0, we would subtract 9 and then divide by 4, and that would be equal to x squared. As soon as we try to square root, we're going to be square rooting a negative. So that would take us to imaginary answers. So we only have these two solutions, 3 halves and negative 3 halves. All right, let's try example 4 here. Factor the trinomial, 16x squared plus 24x plus 9. So, of course, F2 menu, factor option, parenthesis, type it in there exactly as you see. And the calculator should give you this, 4x plus 3, quantity squared. So again, that is if we factor. Now, if we want to change that to a solve, we would change this to solve, left parenthesis. We would type in the same function, give it a comma x, and close the parenthesis. And let's see, I don't have that in my calculator, but that would just be setting this equal to 0. So it looks like x would equal negative 3/4. Okay. Let's do another one. Let's do this with factor and solve. So first, you're going to do factor. Left parenthesis is given. Y to the third plus 8. So try that one. And I'll do down here in blue ink. Solve the same y cubed plus 8, but we're going to tell it, we've got to set it equal to something. Let's just set it equal to 0 and give it a comma, and then tell it to solve for x, and then close those parentheses. And I just realized here, this comma x, well, the function has a y in it. So if our function has a y, we have to solve for y. So we should put a y there. Okay. So the factoring part, the answer would look like this. Quantity y plus 2 times quantity y squared minus 2y plus 4. Now for the solving part, if we set this factor, the first one, the y plus 2 equal to 0, you're going to get the answer y equals negative 2, and that's it. This part here that I'm underlining in green has no solutions. It's never going to equal 0. You could try the quadratic formula. It's not going to work. So here we only have one answer, y equals negative 2. All right. Next up is one of the most powerful things on our F2 menu, number 6 option, common denominator. Usually these are some of the worst problems in class. Students usually just hate these. Way back to example 6 in chapter P, I forget what section, we had these fractions x over x minus 3 minus 2 over 3x plus 4. The calculator will get a common denominator, fix up your numerators, and simplify it all down pretty as can be, as long as we type it in correctly. Remember that these denominators are quantities. They are definitely going to be parenthesized off. And the good thing is, again, when you hit your display, like on mine, I'm looking at it right now, I see common denom, and my function looks like this. I have parenthesis x over x minus 3 minus 2 over 3x plus 4. So this on my calculator display looks exactly like the problem here in the slideshow. The TI-83s and 84s, it keeps it all on a single line of display, so you might have your denominators off and might not know it. So again, here I used blue parenthesis for the outermost for the common denominator function, and then we have here are the denominators, the x minus 3 and the 3x plus 4. If you get everything typed in correctly, your answer should look like this. 3x squared plus 2x plus 6 all over 3x squared minus 5x minus 12. So again, the calculator will do the common denominator and all the other work for you, as long as you type it in right. Okay, now this they'd call a simple, fraction here. We did end this section with complex fractions. So here's example 8. This might come back as a horrible nightmare for some of my students. But I put be extra careful with those parentheses. So here I have it all laid out down below here in the red and the blue ink. And if you type this in correctly, when you hit enter, what's in your display should look a lot like this. And notice here it looks kind of weird, that triple parenthesis at the end. Well, if I sort of color code this a little more, let me go to black ink. Black ink is blocking off the x minus 1. These red parentheses are blocking off our denominator up here, everything under this red line. And then the final blue parenthesis is closing off the common denominator selection. So, and then you should be able to look in your display, and the thing in your display should look very much like that. If you've typed in everything right and your grouping symbols are good. The answer that comes out is negative 3x squared plus 5x minus 2 over the denominator x squared minus 2x. All right, and that is the end of this video to get you ready for the SAT test with your new best friend, the TI-89. If anything in this video was helpful, come back, leave a comment down there saying what was helpful. And if you have any questions in class, just let me know.